As I think almost everybody listening to this podcast is well aware, Star of the Seas is here, and I was on board last week, and the first revenue cruises begin, well, this week as well. So basically, Royal Caribbean's newest ship is here, and the question that everybody's asking is, what is it like? How is it? How does it compare to Icon? And every other superlative you can use to try to compare and contrast Icon versus Star versus Grandma's Pizza versus I don't know what else you could think of as a comparison, but a new ship always conjures up these sorts of questions. And when I went on board for just 3 nights, and keep in mind I'm going back again for another week, I'm doing the first 2 of the showcase sailings, and this is kind of it's not funny, but it's amusing to me because the official inaugural is August 31st, but Royal Caribbean added a series up to 4 now of what they're calling showcase sailings, which are effectively, inaugural sailings, maiden voyages, but they don't want to call it that because they want to respect people that booked the August 31st sailing, so they're calling it showcase sailings. To me, it's, tomato kind of situation, but nonetheless, I'll be on one of the early sailings, and then, of course, the inaugural coming up on the 31st, I will not be on, but I figure between the 3-night preview sailing that Royal Caribbean invited me to go on, and the 2 short cruises that I paid to go on, that'll give me a pretty good indication of what Star is all about. But since we need to do this podcast, and since we're 2 weeks out since our last podcast, I apologize about that, I wanted to bring to you my early thoughts about Star of the Seas, keeping in mind, by the way, that I'm going back on board, and things could change, obviously. But really, the name of the game, when you talk about Star of the Seas, is it's very similar to Icon. I mean, very similar. I knew that the 2 ships were not going to be that different, but I'm not sure I was that prepared or that aware that it would be so identical. I mean, in many situations, it really boils down to simply the artwork on board as being the primary difference. I mean, obviously, the shows are all different, right? You've got Back to the Future in the main theater, and you've got shows in the Absolute Zero and the Aqua Theater being different. But, you can't notice that unless you actually sit down for one of the shows. And when I was on board, I saw the ice show, and I saw a 20-minute preview of Back to the Future, which, by the way, if that 20-minute preview of Back to the Future is any indication, that alone is worth going on the cruise. And if you think, well, isn't that a lot of money to go see one show? Have you seen how much Back to the Future would cost to go see near your city? Plus, keeping in mind, you're going to go out for lunch and all this other. I mean, it's not the same price, but you're on your way. Anyway, it's included. I love that, and I'm really excited to see the full show when I get on board next week. Now, there are 2 main reasons why Star is so close to Icon. First of all is the logistical reason. Star of the Seas began construction right after Icon. So, time-wise, the designs were pretty much locked in. When I was in Finland to go see Icon of the Seas, if you remember a couple of years ago, they already had the blocks in place for Star of the Seas. And when it comes to cruise ship construction, the plans have to be finalized like way in advance. So you really don't have that much leeway in making changes. Effectively, they're the same ship times 2, and that's because of the logistics involved. They had to submit plans in order to get everything moving in the right direction. So there's that reason. But then there's the other equally compelling reason, which is I really do believe that Royal Caribbean knows they have a winning formula with Icon. If there were major flaws with Icon, I feel like they would have done maybe more to try to fix it, so to speak, on Star, or at least make more significant changes. But I mean, Icon has been a critical and commercial success in every shape and form, so it makes sense why the ship on Star would not be that much different. Now, if you're like a cruise fan, probably listening to this podcast, you are. I think we always look at it as like, we're looking for like, hey, what's the latest and greatest? What's the ways that this is really going to stand out and be like, wow. And it's not necessarily like that on Star. You're not going to find significant changes. Really, you've got the shows. You have a couple of restaurant changes, Lincoln Park Supper Club being the most significant one. By the way, I had that booked for my next sailing, so I didn't get to try it as of the recording of this podcast. The Aquadome Market got a few updates, and that's it. There's not really much else in terms of dining that has truly or fundamentally changed. You have artwork, okay? And then there are some minor things, little tweaks here and there. There's an extra pool on the pool deck, right? So nothing like significant that makes you go, wow, this is a totally different experience, or it's such a departure from the original, I really want to try it for that reason. Truly, what Royal Caribbean is doing is they want to have a second ship that is equally as good as Icon in a different market, of course, being in Port Canaveral versus Miami. It does attract a different market. If you're not from Florida, you may think, what are you talking about, Matt? It's all the same thing. It's all in Florida. But truly, there is a big difference between cruises that go out of Port Canaveral versus Miami in terms of who can go on which sailing can be more appealing for one or the other for a variety of different reasons. But I really believe that's kind of the heart of what we're talking about. So with that in mind, without the fact that like we're not going to wow you with like anything I'm going to say like, whoa, this is, guys, an amazing ship. I mean, it is an amazing ship, but it's not an amazing ship because it's totally different. It's an amazing ship because the Icon class is an amazing class of ships to begin with. And that really, I think, is the my biggest takeaway from it. For this particular cruise, again, as I mentioned, Royal Caribbean invited me to go on there. So full disclosure, I didn't pay for this sailing. This was a first look, early glimpse. There were a couple hundred influencers on board, some media, very few travel agents. Actually, the really, truly, quote unquote, media cruise is going to be happening later this week. And basically, I'm guessing I had the choice of either the first glimpse or the media cruise. And I took the first glimpse. So I'll not be on the media cruise. Instead, I'll be waiting for the first revenue showcase sailing, which I'm booked on. And for the sailing, I mean, we had full run of the ship. I was worried it might not be ready. I remember Icon had a lot of work being done, even those last couple days before people got on board. But really, other than a little bit of artwork, there was a mural that was still being painted on the Royal Promenade. And I think they were putting up a sign at Lime and Coconut. I didn't see any construction or anything else going on. Now, granted, the escape room and the Crown Lounge were both locked. Although people did do the escape room, so I take that back. I know for a fact people did the escape room experience. I did not. But the Crown Lounge, it was locked up, and I didn't have Crown Anchor privileges because it's not a revenue sailing, so I don't get them. Not a big deal. I pay for the cruise, so I'm not going to complain. But I wasn't able to check it out because on Icon, I remember that wasn't ready until like the very last minute. Nonetheless, the ship was ready. It looked ready. It felt ready. It was a little weird being on a ship with like, there were literally 500 passengers on board. And that's a weird nuance. And it's also the reason why I'm not writing a review or posting our ship tour yet on YouTube, because with 500 people on board, that's not a realistic cruise. It's not a realistic experience. Not to mention the fact that a couple things were still being tweaked. So like, I just felt it would be disingenuous of me to put out a ship tour or a review before I get on an actual revenue sailing. And on top of that, also for the ship tour, at least, my videography skills are not fantastic. So I'm sure for all of your sakes, you'll appreciate when Jenna takes a video tour and we get on next week. So anyway, that's forthcoming. So what should you look for on Star of the Seas? If you haven't been on an Icon class cruise ship like Icon of the Seas yet, what I think will stand out to you is just how impressive the ship is. Crowd flow is a big part of this, right? Now, I didn't get to see it fully on Star, but I fully expect it to be very much similarly case where you have things like the Royal Promenade being wide open, the destination elevators being a big difference maker and getting people around the ship, and lots happening to help distribute crowds around the vessel. It doesn't, quote, feel crowded, especially compared to the Oasis class ships. I'm not saying there won't be lines, and I'm not saying you won't feel like there's a crowd here and there, but when I've been on Icon every single time, I've always come away thinking, man, the crowd management on this ship is just so much better, and they do such a good job with moving things around that I feel like it really is a difference maker. Like, it really does make it feel like a different kind of sailing, and I love that fact. Number two is, and this is very much the truth, is the food, and especially the included food, is fantastic. When I go on Star for my revenue sailings, I am not buying a dining package. With the exception of the Lincoln Park Supper Club, I am not planning on doing a specialty dining on board because I really believe the included dining is so good. And that's a lesson I learned from Icon of the Seas. Between Aqua del Market, the main dining room, the Windjammer, Pearl Cafe, Sorrento's, that's a decent amount of really good food I could repeat a lot. Now, I also have access to Coastal Kitchen for two reasons. One, I did book a suite. I actually forgot which room I booked, and I ended up booking a Surfside family suite, so that'll be an interesting experience. But I'm also a Pinnacle Club member, as I think many of you know, so I get access to Coastal Kitchen in and of itself. So beyond that, I think I don't need a dining package, but even if you didn't have access to Coastal Kitchen, I really do believe that the complimentary dining is pretty darn good on Star of the Seas. Not to say that there's anything wrong with going, to Izumi or Chops or anything like that, because I absolutely love it. But I would point out that I feel like the included dining is very, very strong. There was actually, on my 3-night sailing, I ended up eating at El Loco Fresh for 2 different lunches, because you know what? It was just really good. I mean, one time I was doing a little research article about a food hack in which I combined the tater tots from Base Camp with the toppings bar from El Loco Fresh, because they're really close to each other. So I took my tater tots and loaded it up with hot sauce and guacamole and salsa. Oh my God, it was so good. So I went back again for a second one later on. That is not a bad way to spend your meals right there. And then you've got Aqua del Market on top of that. The free food game is truly fantastic on Star of the Seas. And then you really do have all the amazing activities on board. Between Thrill Island and Chill Island, there is so much happening for families, especially. I mean, to say that you'd be bored would be, boy, quite a misnomer. You're not going to be by any means, but it's really impressive how much is packed in here. And I'm going to do something that I wrote an article about that I didn't get to do an Icon, and that is take proper use of the pool deck. When I was on Icon of the Seas for spring break, one of my regrets is we spent too much time in ports, not enough time enjoying what the ship has to offer. And to that point, I'm planning on spending more time at places like the Swim and Tonic, which is the swim up bar, which I think is absolutely a fantastic idea. And I love that there's that option there. So like, I want to lean into more of what the ship has to offer. You know, for both of these revenue sailings, we're going to, I believe, Nassau and Coco Cay. I have nothing booked for either one. I'm going to say I'm surprised if I don't get off the ship, because I will get off the ship because I get like cabin fever. I just want to get off for a little bit and walk around, but it's gonna be so hot I'm not even gonna want to stay there. Anyway, the bottom line is I really want to take advantage of what the ship has to offer. If you're wondering if there's anything on board Star of the Seas that disappointed me or I wish was different, it's pretty much the same things that Icon had. Number one, in the cabins, they still have those sliding baskets instead of drawers. I think that's a mistake. They're extremely loud when you slide them. I'm not a fan of that. I wish they get rid of them, but clearly they didn't on Star. Maybe on Legend they'll get rid of them. But I really don't think that's a solution. I think they actually over-engineered a problem that didn't exist. I think drawers are fine. I don't know why we need baskets, but for whatever reason, they still have them there. I also didn't love that on certain nights, the entertainment is staggered in such a way that I think it's really inconducive to actually enjoy it. As an example, the pub or the Schooner Bar on some nights, like they finish playing at 10 o'clock because they start early. Basically, on the Royal Promenade, they don't want a venue that's across from another venue conflicting. So the pub is across from Bolero. So if the pub is playing, the Boleros can't play and vice versa. I think it's a silly rule. I don't think the noise bleed is as bad as they seem to think it is. But I think the problem is whichever night has the entertainment ending by 10 o'clock is no good, because they're starting like way too early. They start at like 6 o'clock when everybody's at dinner. And I really feel like if you're going to the Schooner Bar or the pub, it needs to be like not late night, but it needs to be like, 9, 10 o'clock and later. That's like really when it gets kickstarted. That's still an issue on here, and I'm not confident they'll ever change that, quite frankly. I also don't love the fact that Hooked is still on board. I understand why it's there, and, there's a lot of logistical reasons as well. It's not my cup of tea. Some people might enjoy it, not mine. And then, of course, there's the layout of the Schooner Bar. It's weird. It's way too open, way too far away from the piano player itself. But, these are minor gripes. I don't think any of these reasons are not to go on the cruise. Certainly not any reasons to avoid Star of the Seas. Overall, I really love it. And when I go back on board, I'm really excited to check out the ship and get a chance really to see the vibe of it, especially now doing these showcase sailings. And I'll be back on board for Thanksgiving to take my family on board, because they won't be joining me yet on here. We've got school restarting down here. So overall, I would say Star of the Seas has everything that Icon has and a little bit more, little tweaks and adjustments. So if you're judging a cruise ship by how much better it is from the original based on the idea that it can only be better if it has more and new things, you might be disappointed with Star. But if you loved Icon and like that a lot and wouldn't mind seeing that again, that's what Star is all about there. Ultimately, the shows, I think, are really the reason that will make the ship different enough anyway to enjoy, because, between Back to the Future and the new shows in the Aqua Theater and in Absolute Zero, I really feel like that is enough of a difference to certainly mix it up while still retaining the best things that Icon class is known for. All right, friends, time to answer your listener emails. This is part of the episode where I answer the emails you've sent me. We're really far behind on this, so I'm going to try to catch up with as many as I can. You can always email me, matt@royalcaribbeanblog.com. Our first email is from Julie. Hi, Matt. Love your show. I never miss an episode, and I always feel like there's more to learn about cruising with the Royal Caribbean. Here's a question that I'm wondering if you can help me with. I'm a Diamond member and noticed the listed perk about getting a free, non-alcoholic specialty coffee beverage when you buy a specialty restaurant dinner. This next cruise, my husband and I splurged for the first time on the limited dining package. I'm wondering if this would apply to a meal in a specialty restaurant, even though we haven't purchased that dinner separately. Well, that's a great question, actually. To be honest, I probably overlooked that particular perk. Basically, Julie, with a lot of these perks, well, all the perks, in fact, it's up to you to mention to the waiter, bartender, whomever, hey, I have a Crown and Anchor benefit. Can I apply it? And I would imagine it would. There's no discrepancy as far as I'm aware that if you have a dining package, it'd be any different. So I certainly would ask for it, and I would expect to get it, quite frankly. But again, it's up to you to mention to them that you want to use it, you want to redeem that benefit. Because if you just simply order, especially coffee, and expect them to take it off automatically, that won't happen. So I just want to make sure that's clear. Next email is coming to us from Lior. Hi, Matt. Just listen to your excellent podcast about the Carnival loyalty program drama. And from a personal standpoint, I think that Royal Caribbean can't just sit and watch from the bench, but rather they need to come out soon with some kind of statement. The reason for that is someone like myself who started cruising not too long ago and is invested in a Regent Diamond, there is now a cloud of uncertainty hanging over the plan. While I do not cruise for status or points, I would lie if I say that is not something I care about or that it doesn't factor into my vacation planning for 2026 and beyond. Hope it makes sense. It may be something you talk about in a future podcast. Leor, as always, that's a really good thought, and I don't disagree with you. In fact, your statement there, while I don't cruise for points or status, I would lie if I say that it's not something I care about, is exactly how I feel. I've never cruised for status or points, but it definitely is a reason why I like to cruise, and it's a nice benefit to it, right? Since your email, Royal Caribbean had its earnings call with investors, and Jason Liberty talked about, he didn't directly mention Carnival or directly talked about Carnival and their loyalty changes, but they did allude to it. And he did, for what it's worth, talk about the importance they have for loyalty, because actually in this past quarter, they saw a lot of return from repeat cruisers, and that factored in their business. Now, you might say, well, of course he's saying that, Matt. He's the CEO of the company. That's just lip service. You got to remember, who is he talking to? He's talking to Wall Street in this scenario. He's not talking to consumers. And when you're talking to Wall Street, you're talking numbers and cents. They don't care about a good story per se. They're interested in, how are you going to make more money? And if Jason Liberty is saying, hey, we're going to make more money by, being loyal to our loyal customers, that says a lot. Now, he didn't go out and say, we're not doing what Carnival did, we'll never do that, or anything bold like that. But at least it was a few statements in the right direction, as opposed to certainly saying we're going to do exactly what Carnival did or ignoring it. I'm not saying that we're out of the woods in that scenario yet, especially regarding your concern. But I do believe that at least the early statements, and again, emphasis on early, and I think maybe we'll get hopefully more ideas of what they're thinking as we get into the President's Cruise in September, in which I'm sure people will ask Michael Bailey about that. We'll see what they say. But at least the early statements seem to be at least in the right direction. Next email is from Delana. Hey, Matt, I wanted to start off with a huge thank you for all the information you share with us on cruising. I've been watching your videos since 2019, and they've helped so much. Thanks to you, I'm now a cruise addict. I live in Houston, so my sailings have been out of Galveston for the convenience, but my boyfriend and I are wanting to do an Alaska cruise. Looking at different cruise options, I'm so confused. I'm getting a case of decision paralysis. I'm seeing options like Serenade, Voyager, Anthem, and Ovation, and I see a lot of different titles like Alaska Adventure Cruise, or Alaska Inside Passage, Hubbard Glacier, just to name a few. I'm also seeing significant differences in price, but not really understanding why. Some leave in Vancouver, Seattle, and Seward. Basically, I'm wondering what's your opinion on the best month of travel, best ports to travel into, and what should we recommend? All right, great question, Delana. A couple things. Number one, since it's your first time in Alaska and you live in the U.S., here's what I would recommend you do. You want to take a cruise out of Seattle on probably Ovation or Anthem of the Seas. Which one? It does not matter. Pick whichever one's cheaper. They're virtually the same. I might pick Ovation personally because in 2026, Ovation is going to get a amplification. There'll be some nice updates to that. Probably is going to cost you more than Anthem. If you chose Anthem because it was significantly cheaper, I would not fault you one bit. You still have a great time. The itineraries will be virtually the same. When you're talking about Alaska, the cruises out of Seattle are round trips. So they begin in Seattle and they end in Seattle. It's convenient. It's easy. There are many flights to Seattle from where you live in the greater Houston area. You'll have no problem getting there. You'll have a lot of flight options. You'll see the best ports in Alaska. You're good. The reason to cruise out of Vancouver or Seward is for an itinerary that brings you to some other places you can't get to on Alaska. Those are things you should consider if in the future. As an example, I'm planning on doing a cruise out of Vancouver next year because, I want to see more of Alaska. But as a newbie, I think the ones out of Seattle are totally fine. Don't worry about the titles. They're all just marketing jargon. As long as you're going to places like Juneau and Skagway, and I'm sure you'll go to another port or two, and you'll see, hopefully, Dawes Glacier. You'll have a great time. You will not be disappointed from it. But I would definitely, as a first-timer, especially as an American, do Seattle. There's less flights to Vancouver. It'll cost you more for those flights because it's technically an international flight, and there's also some more logistical issues there. Plus, you're on a smaller ship, like the Serenade. Not the Voyager's not that small, but you're less to do on board. Anyway, I'm just telling you, as a first-timer, do Anthem or Ovation, and I think you'll be totally good on that. Next email is coming to us from Greg. Hey, Matt, thanks so much for what you do. It really makes a difference in cruise prep. I cruised quite a bit when I was younger with my family, but took the past 11 years off. Now that I have my family of my own, we're excited to get back into the cruising world and have 3 cruises booked with Royal Caribbean over the next 18 months. I have a question about the upcoming cruise on Freedom. My parents have booked a room on the same cruise for themselves, but my mother has an obligation to prevent her from being able to make it to the cruise on embarkation day. The very first day of the cruise stops in Nassau. We're wondering if there's any way my father could board the cruise as scheduled and check it for himself for regular embarkation. My mother could miss embarkation and fly to Nassau to join the ship on the second day. I know in my previous experience as a cruiser, I have seen folks on the walk of shame boarding a ship at a port of call with their luggage after missing embarkation, but I've never heard of anyone doing that. Is this something that Royal Caribbean would allow if they knew in advance? Greg, I don't believe it's possible. A lot of times, maybe you're seeing crew members who are doing that, or like entertainers. What you're referring to is called downlining, and Royal Caribbean not banned it, but they kind of prohibited it because of a lot of U.S. regulations. This is not so much Royal Caribbean as it is the U.S. laws about. This has to do with the U.S. PVSA, the Passenger Vessel and Services Act. If you want to look it up and be extremely bored. My understanding is it's no longer allowed. Back in the day, you could do this, but downlining is no longer allowed where you do exactly what you're suggesting here. That being said, would I call and ask? Sure. But I believe the answer is going to be no because of the U.S. laws pertaining to downlining and whatnot. So I feel like it's just not going to be possible. Now, obviously, with your father can check into the cruise. Your mom can no-show to the sailing. That's not a problem. I've done this many times in which I'm booked on the cruise with my wife. I show up, my wife doesn't. They just ask, oh, is so-and-so here? Nope. Okay, well, okay. No big deal. So, yes, if your mom misses the cruise, can your dad still go? Yes. Will there be any problems? No. But can your mom join you in Nassau? Probably not. I might ask, but honestly, I think that's just... I would be pretty surprised if they let you do it because of those changes. I remember, this was back in 2021 or 2022, I remember posting an article about it, that downlining is no longer allowed for whatever reason. They started cracking down on it more. So there you go. Next email is from Melmac. That's the username here. I know I'm just a small fry, but I have a question maybe you can answer. Why is it that Royal Caribbean is so stuck on prevailing rates? For example, I have a cruise booked April 26th. 3 guests, 2 adults, 1 child. For easy math, the price is $3,000 Canadian. The current price for the same cruise for 4 guests in the same category cabin is 2,900 Canadian dollars. Royal Caribbean told me they can't adjust my booking to the new price and add a guest due to prevailing rates, and the new price applies to new bookings only. Why is this a thing? Why does a brand new reservation get a better deal than me who booked months ago and people who actually have royal status? Am I complaining for nothing? I can't be the only one complaining about this. So this is a good question. And your cruise is in April of 26. So you sent this email in July, so you have plenty of time you're not before final payment date. So there's a couple things to keep in mind. Basically, you should be able to reprice this cruise. You're a resident of Canada. There's no reason why you can't assuming it's the exact same. It doesn't even matter. Even if it's a different cabin, it's cheaper. What you're effectively doing is canceling rebooking. Now, but when you reprice it, right, this is allowed. Like, as an example, my travel agent does this for me all the time. Again, before final payment is the key thing here, and you're a resident of the U.S. or Canada, you should be able to. Now, if you're calling Royal Caribbean directly, Melmac, maybe this is part of the problem. In a lot of cases, this is why I always recommend using a good travel agent. By the way, our sponsor, MEI Travel, could work, not now because you already booked your cruise a while ago, Scott, but in the future, they can still book you because you're a resident of Canada, no problem at all. They can reprice the cruise. But I'm wondering if the person you spoke with on the line is either unaware of the repricing policy, or what, I don't know. I'm not surprised by it. I get this sort of question a lot. But as long as you're before final payment date and you're a resident of US or Canada, you should be able to take advantage of that $100 decrease. Now, granted, you might have to book a fourth guest, like you're saying, like, make a mystery fourth guest, make up a, Mel Mac Jr. and put him on the reservation, and, Mel Mac Jr. never shows up, no big deal. But yeah, you should be able to, because you're able to reprice. So I would call back until you get the answer you want, Mel Mac. Hopefully that'll help you out there. The next question is from Courtney. Hi, Matt. First off, I'm a longtime listener to the podcast and just want to say thank you for keeping us both entertained and informed about Royal Caribbean. 2 questions for you today. First off, I loved Wonderland and would pick a ship even now that includes it over one that doesn't if I had my choice. Do you think they'll ever add it to another ship? I love the gastronomy, and is that the right word? And uniqueness of all the dishes. I think that a restaurant like this really fills in the gap for those that love science and food. I guess so. I don't think Wonderland is on the endangered species list, although it is interesting they just got rid of it on Ovation of the Seas for her amplification. They're putting teppanyaki instead. I'm not going to read too much into that yet, Courtney. I think it's quite possible. I think Wonderland is one of those restaurants that has a lot of pizzazz and like notoriety. It's a flashy restaurant, and that gets a lot of attention. So it's possible. Second question, do you think they'll ever switch out cats on Oasis of the Seas? I'm going in Oasis in December, and obviously they want to switch it out by then. I was wondering if they ever switch out shows and how often. They very, very, very rarely ever switch them out, and I think a lot of times it has to do with contractual issues. I remember back in the day, Mamma Mia was on Quantum of the Seas. Chicago was on Allure of the Seas. Obviously that has changed. Hairspray was on Oasis. I'm not privy to the details of the contracts. The answer to your question is yes, it's possible, but no. But it's also extremely unlikely because they just sign contracts. It's just cheaper. It's cheaper to keep her. It's cheaper to keep it around and keep renewing it than it is to get rid of it and find a new show and train a new cast and all those things right there. So hope that makes sense. All right, last question of the day coming to us from Cash Carl. What a great name! Thanks for the podcast and blogs and tips and all that. My family and I love cruising, but live in Utah. So we don't get to do it as often as we'd like. Although Utah does seem to have a large base of cruisers, I do wish we lived closer to one of the coasts. I'd spend many more weekends on a cruise ship. Thus far, my wife and I have only cruised out of the West Coast from LA, and a couple of times from Seattle heading to Alaska. We're doing our first cruise headed from Florida in February to the Western Caribbean on Grandeur of the Seas, which I know is the oldest ship in the fleet, but as you've said many times, there isn't a bad cruise ship. Also, we're pretty easy to please, so as long as the ship isn't a floating barrel, I think we'll be happy. Here's my question. We have Port Topsy, Costa Maya, Cozumel, Roatan, and Belize. We know we want to spend a day at the ruins, a day doing zip lining, mixed with an animal excursion if possible, and a day at an all-inclusive beach. The other day is up in the air. It seems to me that nearly all of these options are available in all the port stops. So in your opinion, which stops should we do these excursions at, or are there better excursions to do in these ports? All right, I love this. So you want to do, let me go back to your thing here. Okay, you want to do ruins. For ruins, I would pick Costa Maya. The reason why I'm picking Costa Maya, I'm actually going to run out of ports here. The ruins of Costa Maya are easier to get to because you're on the mainland already, and they're a little more impressive. So that's one. You want to do zip lining, animal excursion, Roatan without a shadow of a doubt. That's easy. 2. And then you want to do, all-inclusive beach. Perfect. Cozumel, go to Paradise Beach. For Costa Maya, you can book the excursion with Royal Caribbean to the Mayan ruins, or even on your own if you'd like to. For Roatan, the same thing. They're available through Royal Caribbean or on your own. For Cozumel, Paradise Beach is not booked through Royal Caribbean, and I would book it on your own. Just Google Paradise Beach. I've been there many, many times. I love that place. You love that. So I think that'll be fantastic. Belize. Ooh, I forgot about Belize. All right. Pause. Let's restart this. So Belize do the Mayan ruins. Belize has got like nothing going on over there. So if you can do Mayan ruins in Belize, I would do that. And then Costa Maya, I would book Maya Chan, which is an all-inclusive, again, not through Royal Caribbean. You have to Google it, but I love going to Maya Chan. I'm talking a lot about it here on, I think, the podcast. I would definitely do that. So Costa Maya, Maya Chan with a backup. If you don't find anything in Belize for ruins, then do your ruins tour here in Costa Maya. Cozumel, Paradise Beach, Roatan, your ziplining, animal stuff, and Belize, the Mayan ruins. And if you don't find anything for Belize, stay on the ship because it is a long, tender ride over. It's about half an hour. And if you had to spend one day on the ship and skipping a port, it would definitely be Belize for that reason. Thank you, Cash Carl, for the email. Thank you to everybody for checking out this episode of the Royal Caribbean Blog podcast. Of course, if we're going to answer your questions, always email me, Matt@RoyalCaribbeanBlog.com. Until next time, I'm Matt. We'll talk again real soon.